BTS spent 5 years chasing the Grammy, and just now they told the Grammys to go to hell. 7 guys posted the exact same 6 sentences on their Instagram stories simultaneously, said they hope their music can be heard for what it is, rather than being divided by region or language, and walked away from the one award show they spent years trying to win. And the Grammy CEO responded by saying he was saddened. The group that would have been the frontrunner for Album of the Year just pulled out of your award show. The group that boosted your broadcast ratings by over 2 million viewers the last time they performed on your stage. The group that called the Grammy their last summit left to climb and meant it. And your response is that you're saddened. I need to walk you through exactly what happened here because the internet is treating this like a straightforward boycott story, and it is so much more complicated than that. There is a history behind this decision that goes back 5 years. There is a new Grammy category at the center of it that is either a celebration of Asian music or the most condescending thing the Recording Academy has ever done, depending on who you ask. And there is a question sitting underneath all of it that nobody in the mainstream music press seems to want to actually answer. Why has the most commercially successful group of the last decade never won a single Grammy? We are going through all of it, but I want to start with what BTS just released, because you cannot understand why this decision matters without understanding what they walked away from competing with. So, BTS came back from military service in March 2026 with their album Arirang, named after the Korean folk song that functions as the country's unofficial national anthem. 14 tracks. Their first studio album in nearly 6 years. First day on Spotify, 110 million streams, the biggest album debut of 2026. All 14 tracks occupied the global top 50 simultaneously, and the album sold 4.17 million copies in its first week, breaking BTS's own record. Critics called it the group's strongest and most complete album in years. The World Cup halftime show in July. 80 dates on a world tour that sold out North America and Europe before a single song from the album had even been released. A Netflix documentary. BTS in 2026 was not a nostalgia act having a nice reunion. They were operating at a level that most artists never reach once in a career, let alone after a 4-year gap from mandatory military service. And they were widely expected to score Grammy nominations for Album of the Year, Record of the Year, and multiple other categories for Arirang. Industry analysts were treating it as close to a certainty. Then they pulled out entirely. So the obvious question is why? And to answer that, I have to take you back to the beginning. Because this story does not start in July 2026. It starts in 2021, and what happened over the next 3 years is genuinely one of the most revealing things the music industry has done in recent memory. But before I get into the full Grammy history and what it actually tells us about how the industry treats non-Western artists, I need to tell you about the specific thing the Grammys did in 2026 that triggered this whole situation. Because that one decision is at the heart of everything, and it is genuinely hard to read charitably once you know the context. So we're saving that for after the history, because it is going to hit completely differently once you have seen the full picture. In 2021, BTS received their first Grammy nomination, Best Pop Duo or Group Performance for Dynamite, their first English-language single. This was historic for a Korean act. They performed on the Grammy telecast from a rooftop in Seoul. The energy was enormous. ARMY was certain this was the year. They lost to Lady Gaga and Ariana Grande's Rain on Me. Okay, it was a strong song and a legitimate competition. 2022, second nomination, same category. Butter spent 10 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. BTS performed live at the ceremony in Las Vegas in a full spy-themed stage production that most people agree was one of the better Grammy performances of the night. The viewership that year hit 9.6 million, a 2.1% increase over 2021, and multiple sources attributed the bump specifically to BTS being on the show. They lost to Doja Cat featuring SZA. After that loss, RM told the crowd at their Las Vegas concert a few days later, "I know there's a lot of noise out there about the Grammys, but why give a damn about it?" Then he said, "We didn't come to Vegas for the Grammys. We came here for ARMY." Fans were calling it the Scammies at this point. ARMY had moved past disappointed into something more like resigned. 2023, third consecutive nomination in the same category, this time for My Universe with Coldplay, plus a Best Music Video nomination for Yet to Come, and an Album of the Year credit as featured artists on Coldplay's Music of the Spheres. 5 total nominations across that cycle. They lost Best Pop Duo to Sam Smith and Kim Petras. They lost Best Music Video to Taylor Swift. 5 nominations over 3 years. 0 wins. Each time in a category that, when you look at it, is probably the most crowded and competitive at the entire show. Not once did the Recording Academy nominate BTS in a category that felt calibrated to their actual artistic output. An album like Map of the Soul 7, one of the most ambitious K-pop records ever made, received no Album of the Year consideration. BE, a deeply personal album recorded during the pandemic, nothing. But they kept going. They performed, they presented awards, they called the Grammys their last summit. They meant it. And then the Grammys announced something in June 2026 that changed the entire conversation. In June 2026, the Recording Academy announced 5 new Grammy categories for the 69th Awards. One of them was called Best Asian Pop Music Performance. The category would recognize performances originating from or widely recognized within Asian markets, including, but not limited to, K-pop, J-pop, and C-pop, with meaningful use of one or more Asian languages. On paper, this sounds like progress, recognition, inclusion, the Grammys expanding to celebrate a genre that has dominated global music for years. The internet did not see it that way. Within hours of the announcement, the word racist was trending in connection with the Grammys. An NYU music professor and K-pop expert told CNN the new category was unnecessary and said it places Asian artists into a separate box that makes them unequal to mainstream American pop artists. And here's the specific rule that made everything worse. Under Grammy guidelines, a song can only be entered into one performance category in a given year. So if BTS submitted Arirang's lead single Swim for Best Asian Pop Music Performance, they could not also submit that same song for Best Pop Duo or Group Performance. The category that gives you a shot at mainstream recognition. The kind of win that puts you in the same conversation as the artists who have dominated Western music for decades. You have to pick one or the other. BTS had spent 5 years being nominated in the general pop category and losing. Now the Grammys were offering them a separate room, a smaller room, a room specifically built for Asian artists, in a year when BTS had just released what many critics were calling the album of the year. One fan put it plainly, the Grammys creating an Asian pop performance category the same year BTS returns with one of the year's biggest albums feels less like inclusion and more like a new way to keep Asian artists out of the main categories. The Recording Academy CEO Harvey Mason Jr. pushed back on this reading. He said, submitting in a genre category does not exclude an artist from also submitting in the general field. He clarified that recognition in both is possible and not mutually exclusive. And technically, he is right. The rule prevents the same song from being entered in multiple performance categories, but it does not prevent an artist from submitting different tracks in different places. So there are paths around the constraint. But here is why BTS's response still makes complete sense even with that clarification. The message the new category sends is the problem, not just the logistics. When you have been nominated 5 consecutive times in the Best Pop Duo category and lost 5 times, and then the institution creates a brand new separate category specifically for your genre in your comeback year with your most acclaimed work, the signal that sends is clear even if the official rules technically leave other doors open. You are being redirected, politely, with a trophy that has your name on it in a different hallway. The comparison fans kept making was to the history of the Grammys and black artists. For decades, black musicians in rap and R&B were consistently routed toward genre-specific categories rather than the general field awards, which remained dominated by rock and pop acts regardless of what was actually selling. The genre category became a way to honor black artists without the institution having to fully integrate. The parallel was uncomfortable enough that mainstream critics started drawing it openly. And on July 29, 2026, all 7 members of BTS posted the same statement simultaneously. We have decided not to enter the Grammys this year. We hope that our music can be heard and loved for the music itself, rather than being divided by region or language. We thank ARMY and everyone who is always with us. Let me tell you what the Recording Academy actually lost here, because Saddened does not fully capture it. Arirang was on track for Album of the Year consideration. Swim was a genuine contender for Record of the Year and Song of the Year. The group had a world tour with over 80 dates that sold out continents. They performed the halftime show at the World Cup final. If you wanted a single artist to anchor a Grammy telecast and guarantee international viewership in 2027, there was no better option on the planet. And the Grammys lost that. Not through a public fight, not through lawyers or press conferences, through 6 sentences and a simultaneous Instagram post from 7 people. Hybe clarified afterward that this is not a company-wide boycott. Neither BTS nor the label asked anyone else to follow, which honestly makes it more powerful rather than less. 7 people made a specific, individual, considered decision about their own music and their own legacy. Other artists have done versions of this before. Drake pulled his music from Grammy consideration. The Weeknd pulled out after feeling snubbed. Morgan Wallen boycotted. But none of those situations had the specific context of a group that had been nominated 5 times without a win, performed on the show 3 times, boosted the ratings, called it their last summit, and then watched the institution create a new, separate room for their genre in their comeback year. The context is everything. The context is what makes this more than a boycott story. Between 2021 and 2023, BTS was the most commercially successful group in the world. Butter spent 10 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. They sold out stadiums on 4 continents. Their albums charted everywhere. They boosted Grammy ratings. They had Grammy nominations. And they never won. Not once. Now, I'm not saying every nominated artist deserves to win. The Grammy ballot in any given year is full of legitimate competition. Rain on Me is a great song. Kiss Me More is a great song. The 2023 results were defensible on the merits. But what is hard to look past is that in 2022, BTS submitted their album B for Album of the Year consideration, for Best Pop Vocal Album, for Best Engineered Non-Classical Album. They submitted Butter for Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best Pop Duo. Out of all of those submissions, they received exactly one nomination. And the nomination they received was in the most crowded and competitive category they could have landed in. You have to ask yourself whether the path to a Grammy win was ever genuinely going to be available to a Korean language act within the structure the Recording Academy had in place. Not because of any explicit decision by any specific person, but because of how institutions work. Who is voting, what those voters are familiar with, what music feels like serious music to people whose entire frame of reference is the Western canon. BTS spent 5 years playing by the rules. They performed when asked, they accepted nominations graciously, they showed up. And the institution responded by building them a separate room. 7 people who have been some of the most commercially and culturally significant artists of their generation deciding, calmly, that they do not need this particular validation anymore. That their music will find its audience without it. That the last summit they spent years trying to climb maybe was not the right summit all along. That is worth sitting with, regardless of whether you are an ARMY or have never listened to a BTS song in your life. BTS is on the world tour through 2027. Arirang is one of the best-selling albums of 2026. The 7 members made their decision, and HYBE confirmed no one is being asked to follow. The doors closed on the 69th Grammy Awards, at least for them. Harvey Mason Jr. is saddened. The new Best Asian Pop Music Performance category still exists, and K-pop acts will almost certainly receive nominations in it. Whether those artists experience it as an honor or a consolation prize will depend entirely on whether the Recording Academy can answer the harder question BTS just put on the table without explicitly naming it. I will be honest about where I land. I think BTS earned the right to make this call. 5 consecutive nominations and 0 wins, while simultaneously boosting the ratings of the show that kept passing on them, is a patience most artists would not have demonstrated for 1 cycle, let alone 3. I think the timing of the new Asian pop category, in the comeback year of the group most expected to finally break through in a general category, was genuinely damaging, regardless of what the intent was. And I think 6 quiet sentences posted simultaneously on 7 Instagram stories is one of the most dignified responses to a long-running institutional pattern that I have seen from anyone in the music industry. What do you actually think? I want your real thoughts. Like the video and subscribe if you